a girl forced to spin straw into gold or die. A creepy little man appears from nowhere and demands her firstborn child as payment. This is not a cute fairy tale. It is a story about exploitation, desperation, and supernatural coercion, with roots stretching back over 4,000 years. A locked chamber, a spinning wheel, and the sound of straw brushing against wood. In the grim tale, the king's threat is simple and absolute. Turn straw into gold by morning or die. The miller's daughter, alone and powerless, faces this ultimatum with nothing but her hands and a growing sense of dread. Night falls, and with it comes the first impossible task. Out of the shadows, a strange little man appears. He offers her a bargain, her necklace for a roomful of gold. The next night the demand grows, a golden ring, her last token of value, in exchange for another miracle. Each night the king's greed sharpens the blade. Each bargain chips away at what little the girl owns, until nothing remains but her own future. On the third night the king's order is final. Spin the largest chamber full of straw into gold, or the executioner's axe will fall. The girl, desperate and empty-handed, begs for mercy. The little man returns, but this time his price cuts deeper than jewelry. He wants something living. His words are cold. Something living is dearer to me than all the treasures of the world. The promise is sealed. If she cannot guess his name within 3 days, her firstborn child will belong to him. This is not a story about cleverness or luck. It is a slow tightening of the noose, a ritual of loss and surrender. The king's threats, the girl's terror, and the helper's demand for a life each expose how easily survival can be twisted into a transaction. The horror is not in the magic, but in how quietly the rules of the bargain are accepted, and how little power the victim ever truly has. Jakob and Wilhelm Grimm did not invent Rumpelstiltskin. Their role was that of collectors, moving through villages and farmsteads in the German countryside with field notebooks in hand, searching for stories that lived in the spoken word. The tale that became Rumpelstiltskin first entered their notebooks around 1805, recounted by a farmer's daughter near Kassel. Another version followed, told by a second informant, each with its own details and a slightly different name for the uncanny helper. Variants such as Rumpelstiltskin and Rumpelstiltskin. When the brothers Grimm published their first edition of Kinder- und Hausmärchen in 1812, they wove these oral fragments into a single printed narrative. Their editorial hand is visible in every line. The coarse threats and raw violence of the field versions were trimmed or softened. The king's original threat of death for failure was replaced in the 1819 edition with the loss of a child, a subtle but chilling shift that made the story more palatable for a growing audience of children, but did nothing to lessen the underlying horror. The Göttingen notebooks, now preserved in the State Archive, show the process at work. Marginal notes record the 3-night structure, the escalating bargains, and the names as they were first heard. The Grimms chose a single spelling, Rumpelstiltskin, standardizing a name that had wandered through dialects for centuries. Each new edition, from 1812 to 1819, reveals deliberate choices, smoothing out dialect, omitting details considered too harsh, and shaping the tale to fit the expectations of a middle-class readership hungry for moral instruction. What sits between the covers of the Grimm collection is not a neutral artifact. It is a curated version, filtered through the anxieties and ideals of the early 19th century. The printed story became a gate, closing off the wild edges of oral tradition, but the darkness beneath the bargain, the threat, the loss, the price of survival, remains barely contained by ink and paper. The story of Rumpelstiltskin did not rise from a single pen or a single country. Its roots twist through a vast, tangled web of voices, manuscripts, and centuries-old warnings. The earliest printed trace appears in the late 1500s in Johann Fischart's satirical adaptation of Rabelais, a nameless figure spinning straw into gold for a miller's daughter, already bartering for more than mere trinkets. But even Fischart's version stands on the shoulders of older tellings, passed from mouth to mouth across farmsteads and borders. By the time the Grimms wrote down their version in 1812, the tale's skeleton had already migrated from Germany to England, Italy, Scandinavia, and beyond. In England, the imp becomes Tom Tit Tot. In Italy, a variant features 3 fairies, and in Sweden, Klinka Martink. Each variant keeps the same core: impossible spinning, a desperate bargain, a name that must be guessed, and the threat of losing a firstborn child. The helper's name changes, but his role, an outsider with forbidden knowledge offering salvation at a terrible price, remains constant. A 2016 study from Durham University used computational phylogenetics to trace these motifs through 73 European versions, coding each for their narrative DNA. The model's conclusion is unsettling. The family tree points back not just centuries, but nearly 4,000 years, to the Bronze Age. Oral tradition, it seems, can preserve the bones of a story as faithfully as bloodlines. The tale's migration maps onto the ancient spread of spinning and metalworking, suggesting that this bargain, this exchange of survival for something irreplaceable, was already haunting the edges of civilization long before it ever reached the printed page. Rumpelstiltskin's name is a coded warning pieced together from Old German. Rumpel means to rattle or knock, and it echoed through timbered houses, unsettling the night. Steel or stilts means post or stick, the kind that props up a spinning wheel or holds a roof steady. The diminutive ending chen turns the name into something alive, a little rattling post, a household spirit that slips through cracks and is blamed for strange noises and sudden misfortune. In village lore, these sprites were not just stories for children. Their names, whispered in kitchens and barns, were both shield and invitation, believed to keep trouble at bay or to call it forth. Spinning, too, was never just housework. Across myth, it was sacred labor. The Greek Moirai spun and cut the thread of life. The Norse Norns wove destinies at the roots of the world tree. To spin was to shape chaos into order, to bind the world together. Demanding that straw be spun into gold is more than impossible. It is an affront to the gods, forcing the girl into the role of cosmic laborer, mimicking divine creation under threat. The name is both riddle and weapon. Speak it, and the bargain shatters. Forget it, and the spirit claims its price. In Bronze Age Europe, the figure of the smith stood apart, neither fully of the village nor wholly outside it. Archaeological digs across Central Europe and Anatolia have turned up graves where master metalworkers were buried with their tools, bronze axes at their feet, and fragments of slag heaped in careful piles. These are not the burials of ordinary craftsmen. The presence of miniature anvils, tongs, and even figurines of fire spirits hints at a role that blurred the line between artisan and priest. At sites like the Hittite city of Alakahoyuk, votive altars built from copper slag and ash mark the places where metal was smelted in ritual, not just for trade, but as an act of cosmic negotiation. The forge itself became an altar, the fire a boundary between the known and the forbidden. In this world, the ability to draw metal from stone looked like sorcery. The smith's knowledge was guarded, his methods secret. Myths from the steppe to the Mediterranean speak of firebringers, half human, half divine, always liminal. The helper in the Rumpelstiltskin tale echoes these old magicians, a solitary figure offering miraculous transformation, but always demanding a price that feels both arbitrary and absolute. The old bones of the story are set in iron and gold, in the memory of a time when to ask for the impossible meant owing a debt to someone who shaped worlds from fire. The ritual of exchange, something precious for something beyond reach, runs deeper than folklore, preserved in the slag altars and tool-laden tombs that still surface from the earth. The demand for a firstborn child is not a grotesque invention of the fairy tale, but a reflection of ritual logic that haunted ancient societies. Archaeologists have unearthed Tophet burial grounds in Carthage, fields of urns holding the charred remains of infants dated to centuries before the Common Era. Some scholars argue these were the price paid to gods for protection or favor, a practice echoed in the biblical story of Abraham, knife raised over Isaac as a test of faith and obedience. The tale's horror deepens here, as the miller's daughter is forced into a transaction older than writing, where the most precious life becomes the currency for survival. Something living is dearer to me than all the treasures of the world. The story's demand is not symbolic. It is a memory of real sacrifices, a chilling reminder that the cost of impossible help was once measured in blood and bone. The final contest is not fought with strength, but with knowledge. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs hid their secret names inside tomb walls, believing that anyone who spoke them could command their spirit. The Testament of Solomon, a medieval ritual manual, instructs the king to demand a demon's true name, binding the creature to his will. In the tale, the miller's daughter, now queen, learns the little man's hidden name. She utters it aloud, and the supernatural claim collapses. The power that threatened to take her child dissolves, broken not by force, but by the ancient rule: to know a being's name is to wield authority over it. What once seemed unbreakable becomes fragile, undone by a single word. Stories like this survive because the ritual bargain never disappears. It just changes shape. Coercion and the hunger for something living still haunt every exchange of power. Something living is dearer to me than all the treasures of the world. The warning remains: not every tale we inherit is meant to comfort.